Support handout number 8. In problem number 1, we are given the highest y value and the lowest y value on a sine or cosine graph, and we want to try to use that information to figure out the equation of the midline and the amplitude. So if the lowest spot is at 2 and the highest spot is at 4, the midline's got to be exactly halfway between those two numbers, and I think it's pretty obvious that that would be at 3. And so the equation of the midline's an equation, would be y equals 3. The amplitude would be the distance, here's the midline here at 3, the distance from the midline to the top or to the bottom, and obviously the distance from 3 to 4 would just be a distance of 1. Letter B, now we've got a high of 20 and a low of -2. Now this one's a little harder to figure out in our head. How could I do this? Well, the total distance from 20 down to -2 would be 22, 20 in the positive part and 2 in the negative part. So that means the amplitude would be half of that distance, right? Because the amplitude is going to be just from the middle to the top or bottom. So I think we figured out the amplitude must be 11, half of 22. Well, if the amplitude is 11, it shouldn't be too difficult to figure out where the midline is. It would be 11 spaces below the top, which of course would be at 9. 9 must be the number that's exactly halfway between 20 and -2. Let's verify that. Yep, it's 11 from the top. It's also 11 from the bottom. And so our midline is y equals 9. Similar for letter C, we've got 2 as the high. We've got -15 as the low. If we use that same strategy, the total distance between those two numbers would be 17. Half of 17 is 8.5. So the amplitude must be 8.5. And then all I would have to do is travel downward from 2 a distance of 8.5 to get to the middle spot. Well, 2 take away 8.5 would be -6.5. And so there's my midline. Y equals -6.5. And then the last one, let's see, this one's the biggest distance here. I've got 42 up here as the top and -37 at the bottom. What is the total distance between those two numbers? 40 and 30 would be 70, 2 and 7, 9, so 79 as the total distance. You'd have to cut that in half to get the amplitude. Half of 79 would be 39.5, so 39.5. And then where's the midline? Would it be in the positive or in the negative? There's more positive here than negative, so it's going to be somewhere right around here. It'll be 39.5 spaces below the 42. And if you subtract those two numbers, you're going to end up with 2.5. So the midline would be y equals 2.5. Okay, number 2, we're trying to figure out, is there a better way here than doing all this counting and so forth? And the answer is yes. There's a couple of simple formulas that we can use for figuring out the midline and amplitude numbers when we've got the high and the low. Let's actually start in part B, because this is what we were doing to find the amplitude. We were subtracting the high value minus the low value. For example, in part B up here, we did 20 minus -2. Now, that's not exactly how we thought about it, but that's what we did. We subtracted those two numbers to get that 22, and then we cut it in half in order to get the amplitude. And that works every time. Just take high minus low, get an answer, divide that by 2, there's your amplitude. What about the midline? Well, the midline is simply the number that's halfway between the high and low spots. And in math, that's called an average. All you have to do is find the average. How do you do that? You add the two numbers up and divide by 2, since there are two numbers. Try it out again in example B up here. If you add up 20 and -2, you get 18. If you cut that in half, you get 9, and that's where the midline was. Or in letter D, if you add up these two numbers, 42 plus negative 37, you're going to get 5. And if you cut 5 in half, you get 2.5, 2.5, and that's where the midline was. So these formulas will help you to get these answers more quickly. Problem number 3, we want to fill out this table by hand. We should be able to do this pretty quickly. A lot of these values you may know from memory. If not, a couple of pictures, and I'll have it. For the quadrantal angles, I should go to the unit circle. I'm interested in 0 radians, and I'm interested in pi over 2. That's the one at the end. Well, the sine function sends me out the b coordinate. So it looks like it would be 0 here, and it's going to be 1 as the b coordinate at pi over 2. And so I'm done. For the non-quadrantals, again, some quick triangle pictures would work. So for pi over 6, that's just 30 degrees. I could draw myself a quick 30, 60, 90 triangle here, label the sides appropriately, and of course the sine value is opposite over hypotenuse, so 1/2. Really, I could use the same triangle here to get the 60-degree answer. It's not in standard position, but I can still see the answer from this triangle. Sine is opposite, which would be root 3 for the 60 over hypotenuse, so root 3 over 2. And then the 45, 45, 90 situation is the one that we label 1, 1, square root of 2. The sine ratio will be 1 over root 2, which, as we know, rationalizes to root 2 over 2. And then the cosecant row is very easy. I just reciprocate all the values we just had. The reciprocal of 0 doesn't exist. 1 over 0, that would be undefined. Reciprocal of 1/2 would be 2. Reciprocal of the next one, I should use the simplified value from this triangle. So 1 over root 2 is where we started. If you reciprocate that, you'll just get root 2 over 1, or root 2. Let's see, if I reciprocate root 3 over 2, that's going to be 2 over root 3. I will have to rationalize, and so I'm going to end up with 2 root 3 over 3. And the reciprocal of 1 is still just 1. Problem number 4. Just a refresher on the basic graph of the cosine function. I want one period only, and I want enough scale so I can understand the coordinates of the 5 key points. The regular cosine function is the vase, and so I can draw that on there. There's the ending. Here's the middle spot. Here's sort of the first tick mark and the third tick mark. I'm going to have to label all of those. I know that the period is 2 pi, which of course means the middle spot is pi, and the first tick mark is half of that, which is pi over 2. So pi over 2, pi, then would come 1.5 or 3 pi over 2, followed by the 2 pi. Of course, the top here is 1. The bottom here is -1. And that's enough scale that if I wanted to write down the coordinates of the 5 key points, I could. For example, the one right here, I can see very clearly, is 3 pi over 2 comma 0. I can tell that because of the scale on the picture.